Hello, it's me, Kyle. Welcome to Give Pause Hobby, the channel where I stop to appreciate the things I love to fill my free time with. Last week we talked about the beauty and the tactile enjoyment that is Lacrimosa, where we talked about the cool stuff that comes inside this box. This week we're going to talk about the cool ideas that turn those things, those little bits and pieces and beautiful boards into the awesome game that it is. So without any further ado, I've already talked about the game a decent amount last week about when I got it and all that sort of stuff. If you haven't seen that, up here somewhere is the link to go back to the other WATA. But now we're going to go over to the table and I'm going to show you where the mechanics of the game get to take advantage of those awesome pieces. Because again, great components by themselves are just fun toys to have in the box, but good mechanics without fun toys to go along with it can sometimes just come across as a little bit drab. So this is kind of just like last week was like, it wasn't strictly the cool stuff because I couldn't help but spill the beans a little bit about what they were used for. This week is a little bit mostly about the ideas, but still about the stuff, because in this game they're intertwined so entirely in, I think, a really great way. So yeah, let's go to the table and I will show you what's going on under the hood of Lacrimosa. All right, so for the cool ideas of this game, I've split them into two sections. The two boards in the game, the player board and the actual board. So starting over here on the player board, which is going to be, I would say, where you're going to be spending most of your time, but this game is actually really pretty split between these two. You're going to be referencing this a bunch, but more so than lots of other games that kind of look or feel like Lacrimosa, this board over here, you're going to be spending a lot of time really like looking at it critically. So over here on the player board, the first area that I want to talk about, the top and the bottom. And for these, we're going to be using these multi-use cards. So multi-use cards, I think, are a lot of people's kind of favorite things in board games because they just make every decision you make like a double decision. Because if I choose to do this action, then I don't get to use this as to gain resources. Because the cool part about this game is, instead of just taking the card and playing it for top or bottom, on the player board, you're actually going to, on your turn, slot it into the top, and then you're going to choose one to slot into the bottom. And not only is this just like a fun thing when they work, one of my boards is really kind of persnickety. I think that's the yellow player board. That down here I've had to sort of put a little knife in and like widen it, just kind of like wobble it back and forth, so the cards go in and out pretty easily. But this one is, I think, a lot more permissive. Yeah, they just go right in, which is great. But the cool part about these cards is not just that you're having to choose between these two things, but this is the now and this is the next turn. So every time it comes to your turn, you're going to have a hand of 4 cards, except for when at the end you only have a hand of 3, and you're looking at these. So I have 4 different action options here, and I have the 3 different resource types: red, white, and black. So I need to choose which of these I want to do, which action I want to take, and then down here I want to not only choose which one I might want next turn, so kind of preparing for actions. You know, white, they go along with what they're going to be good for. You want white resources to commission for the Requiem. You want red resources to travel, and you want black resources to commission opus to perform or sell, or actually this one, you know, your memories. That one isn't so necessarily needing those 2 colors, but for the white and the red, they definitely are. So you're committing this card to either be traveling or preparing to travel next turn. And then when you put those two things in, then you would draw 2 more cards into your hand to determine what you can do next time it comes around to you. A cool thing about the board as well is at the beginning, it tells you to draw 4 cards and then draw 2, draw 2, draw 1. So a little kind of, it's a little bit, I'm not going to say it's totally descriptive, it's rather cryptic until you know how the game works, and then it's just a nice reminder of the flow of the game. So yeah, having these two where you have to choose between the top and bottom is just fantastic. We'll come back to that because it will come into play later on elsewhere in the game too. So and it's just great that they just get held there, and it's just enough you can see exactly what you need to on there. You don't even remember what else was on the card, which is probably good, so you can't second guess yourself too much. On the right hand side, this is another really cool idea, and this is we're going to be using these markers to go over onto the Requiem, and when you place it down, you're either going to place it on the 8th note or the 16th note side, and then you would put that there. No matter which side you choose, you get to do the thing over here. So for the strings here, I would get 1 black resource disc, which is great because these stick around from round to round even when the squares drop down and have to restart. The only resources you start on this track are the ones that you have down here on your 4 cards. So these are really helpful because they give you some more flexibility. So there's a white, black, and red one there. There's one that raises your purse, which is just your income for each round. Starts off at just money, then money and a cube, and then eventually up here, you're actually gaining victory points as well. You can just gain a victory point straight up, 2 monies, and then the top one, the brass, is unique because when you place that one, whatever value you want, and we'll come back to why these are important later, you get to place the second one in the same way. You're not going to get an extra fancy thing from it, and you're not going to get multiple, your composer tile, which will then slot in here. Actually, it would slot in that way. To remind you that you get a bonus action there. But when you place this down, you get to place this anywhere, which is great because then you can sort of edge opponents out, but you can also steer that area control towards your chosen composer. Again, we'll get to that later on. And the other parts of the board are referred to the right and the center, which isn't anything super crazy mind-bending. It's just really nice quality of life stuff that they built into the board. I know this is sort of cool stuff, but this is where the gameplay purpose really comes into play. So having this little purse that's going to go up your double layered track to let you know how much you're earning each round, this is super important because money is going to be it costs money to make money in this game. So you're going to want have this for sure. Your, again, double layered board here is great. This, I know this is a cool thing, but just another fantastic idea. This is the only part of this player board that has text, which meant this was the only part that they needed to change between languages. So Devere, awesome job. This might be something you've done in other games, but truth be told, this is one of your only games that I've played so far. And this is great. I mean, cost saving for the publisher, but also just a really efficient way to make sure this is regionalized to whoever wants to play it. And then your cool score tracker here. So that's the player board. The big one is having these multi-use cards, and then choosing which of the where you're going to put them, but also just the fact that anytime you have, I have a hand or a deck of 9 cards, but I'm only looking at 4 at a time. Means that as much as I might want to, if I really want to perform, but I don't have any perform cards in my hand, I need to make do. And I think that could be the cause for some players' frustration, but I think it forces me to really think on my feet, and I know what I want to do, but sometimes that's not always what I can do at that moment in time. And that only gets more intense as you go through the deck. And so the deck here is made up of the 5 eras. These are just the starting cards that you have. In era 1, when you get to the actions, you see that's an action and then some extra bonuses. And then down here, the resources you stand to gain are either, multiple or just more of the same. When you get into the second era, you're getting into multiple actions. So it's not just you're getting a bonus, you're getting to do 2 things at once. And then the third era, you guessed it, multiple actions and a bonus. And down here, you're starting to see just getting victory points for playing those actions. Fourth era, multiple actions and more bonuses, and then even more victory points. And in the 5th era, if you write down any memories, you get new cards into your deck. There are no actions because well, I'll explain that in a little bit, but it's just victory points. You're just earning like victory points for the end of the game, because at that point there are no more actions you're going to be spending these resources on. You get kind of like the end game chip points. For every 2 resources you get a victory point, but getting just straight up 4 victory points is definitely better than anything else you're going to get down here. So as the game goes on, the cards that you have at any given time to choose from are going to be limited, and the ones that you get later on in the game you're always going to want to be playing. Unfortunately, both the top and the bottom are good. I shouldn't have put this away yet. Getting to do 2 actions and make 2 money, that's fantastic. However, maybe getting those 2 and a victory point, that's also equally fantastic. It's all situational, obviously, but it's not like you're going to get ones that are really strong actions, but not strong for resources. They're almost always mostly equal. Again, one of them is probably going to be more beneficial to you, but they both make a good case for themselves. So while we're on the player board, another cool idea is the soloist. This is the automa opponent. And so when I set up this game, I set up so pretty much exactly how you would do for the soloist, except they don't use the cubes here. You actually don't need to put these on anything in particular. These boards have specific spots where they go. The soloist doesn't actually collect the little tiles here, and they don't care what type of instrument it is, so it can just be like a pile of them. But when you play these, you would draw from the top of the deck, and you would place an action up here, and the one down at the bottom, there isn't a resource to be gained. Instead, the action is going to say you're going to look in the center column here, and it's going to tell you that if you're moving, you're going to be moving up 1 court. We'll get to that when we get to the map. But so for all of these, for performing or selling, you're going to look down to the bottom of whatever one it is, and you're going to be either looking to the left or the right most opus, so you can sell it. Same thing with composing an opus, or placing an instrument piece on the score for the Requiem. You're going to go find what movement you're talking about, and then just place one either the topmost or the bottommost spot on that track. So it's a really easy playing, not easy to face. I've only played on easy and normal. Obviously normal is a little bit more challenging. The only real difference is where you start on this track, because the actions are slightly different, so it does take a little bit of getting used to, and I fully intend on making a solo section for this game because I think it's really great. But this track is super important. It's one of the main ways that the bot is going to be scoring points throughout the game rather than just at the end for the Requiem track. So the only thing, well, that's not true. There are a couple cards that you will replace. If you're on the normal one, you replace one card with another. If you're on the hard version, you replace 2 cards with 2 others, and they make these actions just slightly stronger. The other thing you change is where you're going to start on this track. because you're only going to be going up, and once you get to the top, you can't really see it, but anytime you are asked to move your purse up beyond this topmost layer, you just get 2 victory points. So the higher up you start the bot, the sooner they get to that point where they're just earning victory points just because they moved their purse. But yeah, that's the stuff on the player board itself, which I think already has some really cool stuff, but just wait until you get to that board over there. All right, so the board, like the big board, there's 3 distinct areas. And I mentioned this in the last game. This is where some of the thematic issues some people have with it, because this is during Mozart's life. You are going around, participating with Mozart. Up here, you are composing opuses. You're kind of funding him to write these amazing works, and you're kind of like stamping in memories of what you've done with Mozart, which is both like during his life but also afterwards. I'm not sure, I guess maybe this is when you're sort of talking to his widow about what you did when you were along for the ride with him. And then down here, this is definitely post Mozart. So this is the Requiem that he left behind unfinished. And so in each game, you have 4 available, but you have 2 different composers that are going to be the 8th note and the 2 16th notes. And this is going to be where you're going to finish his work. You are hiring them to come over here and make his Requiem sound amazing, even in his stead. So I've sort of divided this up into the 3 areas, because really the cool part about this, I talked about this on Twitter recently, it was asked how much player interaction is there in this game, and I said actually quite a bit. And what's nice about it is it comes in 3 different varieties. It comes in this area control, which we'll get to first, comes in this competitive cooperative sort of like group project of moving around the map of Europe. And then it comes in strictly the opportunity, like just the conveyor belt of a market, which is in some other games really the only or the primary source of player interaction is just taking something that somebody else might want. In this game that exists, but that's not the only thing that exists. All right, so let's take a look at the area control, the Requiem down here. So it's split into these 5 eras of the game, which are the 5 movements that's been kind of split into. Kyrie, Sequentia, Offertorium, Sanctus, and Agnus Dei. And in each of these, now when you start the game, each of them has all of these little icons for the different instruments available. And then when you're setting up the game, you have to look at one of these cards, and depending on the player count, 2, 3, or 4, you are going to make adjustments. So if 4 players, you would just put one of these little quarter rest symbols over these 3 instruments in these 3 movements. 3 players, you would do that, plus you would add this middle row. At 2 players, you would do these top ones up here, and then so everything would be covered up. And honestly, this is a huge amount of variety. The game that I most recently played, I think there were only 2 brass areas, maybe 3, that I had to choose from. And there are, as you can see, a bunch of them on here. Now, on the flip side, I had almost all of the percussion things available last time, but I only have 1st movement and 5th movement percussion available. And this is huge, because you'll remember on your player board, not only are there certain benefits that you can gain from these different instruments, but you have only a limited number of them. It's not just that you get a benefit every time you place one on a brass. I can't go brass, 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 brass. I only have 2 brass. So I have to choose where is it going to be most beneficial to maybe place that brass one and the benefit or bonus one that I get with it. But the same coin, if I miss placing something on this 1st movement percussion, I know that I'm only going to have this other spot to place it. Now I only have 1 percussion in my player board, But if the other player gets to this first, then I don't get to place that one at all. So this is super cool. But also the composers that you have, in theory, they are kind of the two different varieties, or four different varieties, I guess, any given two for the game, of the same idea. In the first movement, you're just going to get something. In the second movement, you're going to earn something that during your cleanup phase, it's going to get you something every turn. So instead of a one-time, it's just a benefit. In the fourth movement, you're going to get something every time you compose, perform, or sell a piece of that type. So there's chamber music or sacred or symphony, you're going to earn a victory point. Over here, Sanctus is just a bunch of victory points, but it also is going to cost you a purse. And the last one, this is kind of hard because you need to rope it into one turn. But anytime you do a travel action, you get to do an additional one. And when you place it down, it just becomes that reminder. I'm not sure if that was in the camera. There's the travel is plus an additional travel one. But what's amazing about these are they cost completely different things. This is the same movement, the Sanctus movement, for 3 victory points as opposed to 2. They both cost a white resource and a purse. So this one costs $4 on top of it. But also the amount that you have is actually different. And I didn't really realize this until recently that, for the first movement, I have 2 for Eibler. I have these 2, but I only have 1 for Freistatler. So there's quite a bit of variety that goes on in this composer department. So that's the area control, the score down at the bottom. In the middle, which is the sometimes cooperative competition. The reason I say that is because everybody is going to be moving around with Mozart. Now you are kind of his benefactors who are giving him money to be the amazing composer that he was. So you're all kind of in tow going with Mozart on this journey. So the money along the pathway, you can go as far as you want. So if I really want to get down here and I was here, I would just have to pay 1, 2, 3 gold and then the 2 travel icons to pick this up and to get 5 discs of whatever color I want, which is a pretty awesome ability. Now I could have just paid 1 gold and only paid 1 travel icon to get 2 of them. So I would have to choose that. The reason I say it's sometimes cooperative competition is because if I really wanted to get here and somebody else before me moved Mozart to take advantage of this one, now I'm that much closer. I only need to spend 1 gold. However, someone else might see this, might have paid the gold and just taken this, and then it goes away. So it is definitely competitive. I'm not trying to pull your leg and say this is half competitive, half cooperative. It's just, again, like everything else, situational in terms of what you want to do and what the other players want to do. Another really cool thing about this is that at the end, let's say at the end, these were the only ones that got, visited. That means all the rest of these would get flipped over to their ornate side, which is cool because they sort of become part of the fancy frame that they are all housed within. And you'll notice, so for 1 travel icon, you get to perform or sell something. On the back, still perform something or sell it, 1 gold and 1 victory point, which is typically how they all work. They just get that bonus. This one costs 2, you get a red disc, and then you have this end game scoring opportunity. If you have 1 of each these instruments in the Requiem at the end, you get 7 victory points. That is the same. It still costs you 2, you get 1 disc, but then you get a gold and victory point. So the benefit on the back, actually that's not true. Some of them are 2 gold and 1 victory point. So, but they're all kind of that combination of some money and some victory points. But at the end of the round, then you would take from the top of the pile and replace them with new kind of lame side up tiles, and the competitive cooperation begins anew. So you're moving Mozart around to take advantage of this. Now this can be huge because you would take a movement action to go here, say, and then you would pay the red icon to perform or sell a piece. So you get to play, by playing your movement card, you get to move here and take a completely different action. So remember we talked about maybe you really want to perform your piece, but you don't have that card in your hand. You only have these. So situationally, sometimes you can use movement to find the action that you don't have in your hand, and then you can actually take advantage of that. Now on top of that, because that's already cool enough, but on top of that, sometimes in each round you have a bonus card, and it's going to say for a certain action you get a benefit. So in the first round, they're actually all going to benefit you for traveling. They're either going to give you a victory point, a red disc, or 2 monies. And so then that situation that I just showed you, not only do you get to use a move to take the action that you actually want to do, but you get the benefit for having taken the move action, because at the end of your turn, however many of these you have in your player board, you get that many times that. So it's a kind of multiplicative benefit, which is really cool. Also, pro tip, these little kind of dead zones on the board are typically where I keep my discs and my money. Now, last section up at the top is the market. And so I said adding scope to the game and the setup. So at the top you have this market track, which I'm going to shift this actually a little bit. There we go. Which, as is pretty common in the games, as you get further away, like the most recent entrants to the market are going to have additional costs. And you'll see on the since they are either a memory, which is going to go into your deck, or an opus that you're going to be able to perform or sell, they're going to go either to the top or the bottom of this little extra tall space. Now what's cool is you can see for the opus there's a little half symbol for let's see, kind of writing music with the quill. There's half that there, and the other half is at the top here. So it reminds you that if it's opus, it should be at the bottom. And then the opposite for, let me find the memory, of course, it's the last one in my deck. So kind of journaling your memories with Mozart is down here at the bottom. You just see the teeny little part of the candle, but the other part is down here at the bottom. So memory cards go to the top, opus cards go to the bottom. And the closer you get to the right-hand side, the cheaper they get, there's fewer costs for memory cards down here. Also, if you get all the way to the side, for opuses, you actually get a bonus. There's a black disc that you get there. So this market is really varied. For every one of the eras, there are the opus and memory cards intermixed. And then when you're setting up the game, you will set them into these eras delineated by these tiles, of which there are 3 for each of the eras. Now, what's cool about, let's start with the cool stuff, because these, not only are they going to get you more opportunities, more benefits, and more resource generation, they're going to take the place of other cards in your deck, which sometimes is going to be a no-brainer. So you take this starting card of just a travel and a red cube, and you're going to turn that into travel and 2 money, or 3 red cubes. So that'd be a pretty sweet upgrade. And your deck maintains the amount of each of the actions that are in there. However, what's really cool about this system is if you've looked at the board state, you've looked around the table at your opponents, you kind of know their play style, and you say, you know what, I really want to be traveling a bunch. I don't actually want to give this up. I think I'm going to give up my Requiem card, or one of them. And I don't want to do that action anymore, and I'm going to replace it with this. Because when you purchase memory cards, they take the place. You put the card you want to replace at the bottom of your player board, and then remove it, and you place this at the bottom of your player board. So whatever card you purchase, you are guaranteeing that you will get that reward at the end of that round. But then you lose the card that it replaces, obviously. So you can dictate, and it can be really effective, but you can also lock yourself out of certain actions if you're not careful. Because, for instance, you only have one memory card here. So if you get rid of this, you replace it with something else that doesn't also have this memory like action, you don't get to interact with half of the cards up here anymore. Now it's not quite so strict for the composing an opus, because there are two of those. You have two Requiem cards, you have two perform or sell, and you have two movements, but you only have one of these ones. So tread lightly if you think that you want to get rid of that, because you might regret it. Now so this is kind of standard, just get in other players' way, trying to take advantage, or rather take a thing that they might also want, which is great. Player interaction, but typically only the negative side, which is fine. We're playing board game after all. Speaking of negative side, however, this part of the, I'm showing you video of setup of the game, which took about 12 minutes, and I just recently played, so I was able to go pretty much straight through without having to hem and haw over exactly what to do. And for teardown, it's actually a little bit easier if you do a thing I'm going to show you in a little bit. It was, I think, like 5 to 10 minutes. So about 10 or more minutes, give or take, on either side. But the market part is definitely one of the more time-consuming aspects of the setup, because you need to go through the opus and the memory cards for each era. Depending on the player count, you need to remove a certain number of each type. You need to mix them together and then stack them up in descending order with one of those bonus cards in between each, which sounds like a lot and does take a little bit of time, I will be honest. But we're going back to positives here. That is what gives this game its sense of scope, its sense of, like, you are ramping up. You are going from early days Mozart, where people are like, oh yeah, he's pretty good, to end times Mozart, where people are just like, oh my God, we're going to lose this just monumental person in the world of music. And in other games, in other deck builder games, which this is kind of a deck alterer, there's sometimes a sense of like dead market. You look out and you're like, well, none of those are helpful. And some games, that's just a reflection of that the market doesn't change much. But other games, it's that certain cards lose their utility as the game goes on. But the way this game is built, that doesn't happen, because cards get so good later on that maybe early on you're like, well, I'm going to take a turn to just get a slightly better card now. Well, you only have so many times you can, journal a memory. And honestly, you get more bang for your buck the more you wait, but you only get to use that card for that many fewer turns if you wait too late in the game. So it's everything decision that you're making in this game is just like super critical, and it's awesome. Now, one last pro tip I'm giving you, these are the 5 different eras, and I have left them, or rather after I, removed 2 opuses and 2 memories. Doesn't matter so much in the 5th era, because there are not a variety of them. And then the 2 bonus cards I didn't use, I'm leaving them in a stack of that era. And the reason this is super helpful is throughout the game, anytime you need to discard a card, I would either put it in a pile over here if they are any of the starting cards, because you don't want those to get mixed in with the game. And when you're storing them, I just store, you might call me a heretic, I store those player starting cards with the starting pieces. So it's just super easy to get that set up. And when I've played recently, this is the method I've left for all the first era, second, third, fourth, fifth, just they have their own discard pile. So at the end of the game, yes, I'm gonna need to go through and separate the opuses and the memories, but at least I'm not having to do that with all the different eras. So for instance, when I tear this down at the end of this video, I'm just gonna go, here's all the fifth, here's all the fourth, here's all the third, here's all the second, and here's all the first. And now I need to go through each of those and do the thing, but I don't need to separate these different eras from each other, which is huge. All right, so honestly, that took a little bit longer than I was expecting. Turns out there's just a lot of cool ideas going on in this game here. This is actually just the lid because I need to go clean up the thing back there on the table. But again, Lacrimosa is just a super cool game. It's, there's so many interesting ideas going on. And I know that it's like the classic, whether it's Dune Imperium or Lords of Waterdeep or Snowdonia or any of these games, these like action selection or worker placement or whatever, deck builder, like whatever, you know, method that you build out your strategy and your game over time, you're gonna get to the end of it and be like, I kind of wish that I had done more of that thing, or I want to play again so I can experience what it would be like if I did, you know, whatever, insert mechanic here more. This is that times so much because you only have 4 turns each era. Now each turn is a top and bottom card, your action and your resource acquisition. So, you know, you're looking at 5 eras, 4 actions, so 20 times you get to decide something. But that said, you know, like I talked about with the, you know, journaling your memories thing, wherever you buy that card, it's going to go into the bottom of your player board. You're only at most going to be able to do that card 1 time for each of the remaining rounds. So if you get one of those awesome like 4th round cards where it's 2 actions and a bunch of bonus icons, that'll just get relegated to the bottom of your player board for that round, and you will only have 1 chance to play it in the 5th round. And when it comes up, you actually might not even want to do that action. You might want to be doing something else. So there's so much situational, that those tactics, you know, there are strategies, there are, you know, that you can employ, but this game is so tactical. So, you know, these are the actions I have available. These are the resources I will generate. This is the board state. This is how much money I have. What is my best play? And it's just fantastic. Now, I've only ever played this at 2 players multiple times, and then solo just a couple of times. So I'm really interested to see what it would be like at 3 or 4 players. I imagine kind of insane. But anyways, that's Lacrimosa, and I think it's fantastic. If my word doesn't convince you, then the length of this video after last week's video about it and the forthcoming solo section video to show you how to use the soloist, hopefully that will, you know, convince you that I really enjoyed this game. So without any further ado, I will say goodbye. Thank you for taking a pause with Give Pause, and I'm going to go clean up Lacrimosa and look forward to when I can play it again. So until then, happy gaming, and we'll see you next time.